Again, right, change the location again. We've moved to my lounge. So today I'm going to have a go at doing firstly a little bit on market failure, and then secondly something on externalities, which are a type of market failure. So we say, well, what is market failure? This is something that people tend to misunderstand, and they tend to think it's something to do with the government or those sorts of things, and it simply isn't. Market failure is simply a situation where the free market. So that's the whole point, which is there's no government. So the free market, in other words, supply and demand. What it does is it misallocates resources. Now, if you remember what we said a minute in the last one that I made, we said that in theory, supply and demand will maximise welfare. So if we go to where supply equals demand, then community surplus will be maximised. And what this is saying is market failure is a situation where the free market, it doesn't do that for some reason. So it will produce where supply equals demand generally, but sometimes supply equals demand doesn't give us the optimal allocation of resources, or sometimes supply and demand doesn't work. So it misallocates resources, and therefore, as a result, it fails to maximise welfare. In other words, there's a welfare loss, and a welfare loss can simply mean that we don't make enough of some things. So it's not that welfare is it's not something we kind of overproduced or something. It's just that we're not making as many as we should relative to what would be best. So we get too few of some things and too many of others. So examples of the sorts of things we're thinking about. In a free market, we'll have too few public goods, because they're non-excludable, they won't be supplied at all. But if we look at kind of fishing, the tragedy of the common goods, we get too many of those, because they're non-excludable but diminishable, then they all get consumed in the present time period. So all market failure means is that it's really kind of the reason that we need government intervention. It's a situation where if we leave the market alone, then we get a bad, suboptimal allocation of resources. We don't get maximisation of welfare. And all the different market failures, when you're talking about market failure, what you want to do is to explain, firstly, why is it that the free market has misallocated resources? Secondly, why has welfare not been maximised? And what is the issue? Is it that there are too few or too many relative to what would be socially desirable? So if we look at one of the, so there are many different types of market failure: public goods, common goods, information asymmetries. Some people say inequality is a form of market failure. What we're going to look at, just for the rest of this one, is externalities. And externalities, in their broadest sense, these are sometimes called spillover effects. What they are is that they are impacts, and they can be either positive or negative. Doesn't really matter, but each of those is bad, because the reason they're bad is that they're impacts that are ignored by consumers and producers. And if they ignore them, that means that they're going to demand or supply at the wrong level. So the consequence is that either demand or supply will be too high or too low, depending. And that's the basic idea, which is that because there are these, they're sometimes called, we could sometimes call them third-party effects. The first party being the consumer or producer, the second party being the producer or consumer, the third party is somebody not involved in the transaction, that's nevertheless affected by it. And because they're a member of society as a whole, we would prefer that these spillover effects were taken into account. So we take, we can divide these externalities into two broad subsets. So on the one hand, we have consumption externalities. And basically, these are side effects or third-party effects or spillover effects of the use of the product. So if the problem arises not when it's made, but when it's used, then we have a consumption externality. so we can argue that, I don't know, there's probably no there's probably no side effects of making beer, and the problem comes when people drink it and are sick on the pavement, that type of thing, so therefore that makes it a consumption externality. And the problem here then is that there is either a positive or a negative side effect of using it. And therefore, what that means is that demand, which is based always on marginal private benefit, it no longer equals marginal social benefit. And that's a problem, because to maximise welfare, we need to be at this situation. We need to be at the situation where if that's quantity and that's costs and benefits, if that's marginal social benefit, MSB, and that's marginal social cost, MSC, we want to be here at Q star. Because if we're at Q star, all the units that we've made have more benefit. They add more to benefit than they do to cost. And therefore, welfare would be maximised at point A. But if the market takes us to some point that isn't A, takes us to a different output, either higher or lower, then we'll have a misallocation of resources. So let's look at it in the context of consumption externalities then. So one type of consumption externality is negative consumption externalities. So there is a negative side effect of consumption. And negative side effects, they're generally called external costs. So this could be driving my car, kind of run over hedgehogs or grannies, that type of stuff. I don't care, but the granny's family aside. So what we've got to say is, well, so because it's a consumption externality, the issue is with demand, not with supply. And that's the key thing. Whether it's consumption or production externality, that's the way you've got to take it. That's what you've got to think about, which is that it's to do with the demand. So saying, here is my demand for driving based on my perceived benefits. We'll suppose that the marginal social and marginal private costs of driving are the same. This may or may not be true. But we'll assume there's no problems with making the car. It's when I drive it, this is the problem. So the equilibrium is going to be here. The problem is then that we don't really want to be there, because I'm overestimating the benefits of me driving my car. And by driving my car, I'm polluting the environment, killing hedgehogs and so on. So what we're going to say is that the true benefit is lower, so that per kilometre that I drive, these are the negative side effects. That's the negative side effect of that kilometre, that's the negative side effect of that kilometre, and so on. So what we're saying is that the true benefit, the marginal social benefit, is less than my own benefit. So therefore, we really want to be there, the optimum level. And the reason we want to be there is that's the marginal social benefit, that's the marginal social cost. If we'd stayed there, welfare would be maximised. But we didn't. We drove extra kilometres. And therefore, for those units, the social cost was greater than the social benefit. And therefore, we kind of reduced our overall welfare. We did get lots of welfare, but we also got kind of dis-welfare or anti-welfare or something, And that, therefore, that L reduces the overall level of welfare that we've got. It kind of eats into that, if you think about it, It's like a minus amount off the purple area. So therefore, in that case, we'd want to restrict, we'll talk about this in another video, but we want to restrict the use of goods with negative consumption externalities. And there's various ways that we could do that. Sometimes there would be a positive consumption externality. And we can see, it's the same analysis. So this is something where, like getting a vaccination. The reason I get a vaccination is I don't want the disease, but by getting vaccinated, I don't give it to you either. So let's suppose that's my benefits. We'll assume there's no side effects in the manufacture of vaccines. It's just when we use them. What we're saying in this case is that there are positive spillover effects. There are positive effects on third parties. So that's the benefit to me of getting a vaccine for Simon, but also, because I don't give it to my students, this disease and so on, there is an extra benefit that I ignore, that I don't take it into account. And it's true for everybody. Everybody has positive side effects. And therefore, we would really prefer the demand for vaccines to be higher. But in a free market, it won't be, because we all just take into account our own private benefits. So therefore, we would prefer to be at Q2, because if we were, or Q optimal we'll call it, if we were, we'd make all of the units where the marginal social benefit is greater than the marginal social cost. And then welfare would have been at that level there. Unfortunately, though, I don't demand enough. We don't, as a society, demand enough. The equilibrium is here at QEQ. So the good news is that we get lots of vaccines. Yeah, so we do get all of this welfare, all of the gap between marginal social benefit and marginal social cost. That's the good news. But we don't get as much as we could have done. And that's the sense in which resources have been misallocated. We've used resources that could have been used for vaccines, I don't know, to make burgers or something. And therefore we failed to get as much welfare as we could have done. So welfare, again, has been lost. In the first case, the one we looked at a minute ago, it was overconsumption. Here, it's underconsumption. Okay, I'm past 10 minutes, so I'm going to pause here. I'll come back and look at production externalities and some of the solutions for these sorts of things in the next one.